Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Happy 2024. We are officially in a new year, whether you were prepared for it or not. We are here, and you are here. And let's see what the onion, as we unravel it, what this year looks like. Going to be interesting. But before we get too deep into it, welcome to the MSP Initiative's MSP Talk. This is the first session or episode of 2024. Thank you for joining us. For everyone that follows us, and I know a lot of people listen to this kind of podcast edition. Hopefully, everyone had a great holiday. I hope you got your downtime in, your R&R. Now we start to get back to work a little bit. So MSPinitiative.com, this is where everything that we do exists. This very session is being recorded. It will be, under the sessions tab on MSPinitiative.com. Of course, it's in your podcatchers and then YouTube as well. So and that's where you'll find this. We have two, and sorry for our folks that are in outside of North America, but we have two MSP Community Mind events coming up in 2024. One in Nashville, Tennessee, in April 17th and 18th. One in Denver, Colorado, July 24th, 25th. We loved this format last year, and I know we're one of many organizations out there trying to change the tides a bit and actually have a true educational format rather than the sugar-coated vendor-created content that's not really helping you. So we really love this format. MSP panels and workshops. So we want you to be able to learn from people who are in the trench doing what you do on various topics. And then when you want to go into a topic deeper, we want more than a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation, actual at least 2-hour workshop so that we can work through a conversation. So we had a lot of great content and speakers last year. Looking forward to this year as well. Now, that's the classroom stuff, right? That's where we learn. Where we have fun are the block parties. So last year we did many block parties. We had some in Europe, obviously some, and the rest here in North America. Coming into 2024, we may have some in Europe, some in North America, and then we may be finally getting down to our friends in Australia and New Zealand. Let's see how it all shakes out. But we did 6 of these last year in varying shapes, sizes, formats. We work with many of the larger event holders to work together to create pretty cool experiences. And so we do this for you, the community. We'll continue to do these. They're a lot of work, but love creating a cool, memorable experience and vibe. Can't have a major record like radio recognizable act at every event, but still can walk away with some cool ones. So thank you if you came out in 2024. We're gonna live up to the standard. We'll make sure 2023 we're gonna live up to the standard in 2024. Stay tuned. Community offers. These are offers that some of the vendor communities have thrown out, just deals for you. If any of them apply, feel free to take advantage. And then our industry calendar, our very diligent event creator, not event creator, but event Excel list builder. He has so many events. Jen, behind the scenes, has pre-populated everything that we were able to get ahead of time coming into 2024 into the calendar. So this goes all the way to December. Of course, others will pop in, and as we learn more, we will get them into this. But they are here, so feel free to go all the way into December of 2024. Almost 300 events. Like I said, we'll learn more events will get announced as time goes on. We'll get them in here once we know about them. Just trying to consolidate everything into one place. Just so many things going on. So that being said, that is everything at MSPinitiative.com, which is pretty much what we do. So if you want to learn more, that is where you will find more information. So now with all that homework out of the way, we bring our very first guest on for the year, Brian from Mesh. Who's actually, I appreciate it. I think the folks over in Europe kind of take a little bit more of a holiday vacation period here during the end and beginning of the year. I know us Americans, we just we live to work, we don't work to live, something like that. So but thank you, Brian, for spending a little bit of what's your extended holiday there on our first session of the year here at MSP Initiative.
Oh, my pleasure, Georgie. Very honored to be on. Thanks for having me. And I was back to work for, I think, not all of us in Europe, but most people are back today. Some people are back next Monday. But yeah, you're right. You guys, you work too hard over there in the US.
We like unfortunately, and not to get too deep into the predictions for 2024, but a lot of people on this side of the ocean have multiple jobs because it's a little bit more expensive now to live. Costs have gone up. Inflation is a real thing, and all of a sudden you could be the Uber driver on nights and weekends, when your day job is not cutting it. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a trend. They're saying the average worker in America is holding 2.5 jobs now. That's
Wow.
that's surprising.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when they get all of those crazy job reports they send out every quarter, and they're like, oh, the jobs went up. It's like, well, how many of those jobs are secondary or third jobs for, all of a sudden it looks like things, more and more people are employed now. It's the same people just doing more work. So, or some of the time it is. So, definitely interesting. I want to just take a quick intro, Brian, for people who don't know you, don't know your story, your journey. Would love for you to share that a little bit, and then we'll just get into, hey, what did you think 2023 was? Did all the things that you think was going to happen happened, or did we mispredict? And then, of course, we're in perfect time to talk about a little bit of 24 as well, and what do you think happens this year? But I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole. Go for it, my friend.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Brian Byrne, CEO, co-founder of Mesh. Mesh is the first email security platform specifically built for MSPs. My background, I'll try and give it the shorter version. Unlike probably most of the listeners who are MSPs, I'm non-technical. I get into the space purely by accident. Kind of finished high school, didn't really want to do anything. I was like, oh, you don't have to get out of bed in the morning. Well, that's good for me. And I quit university after like 2 hours because I was really immature. I then went into construction, did that for supposed to be a 4-year apprenticeship. Was still doing it after 7 years, and finally fell out of that, which was a great thing to happen. And I landed in what would be called today an SDR role. Back then it was a telemarketer, cold caller role at an email security company, purely because it was 5 minutes from my house. Knew nothing about it, and what's it now, nearly 12 years on, noticed a little bit more about it. So that email security company was called MX Sweep. Probably tell from my accent. So I'm Irish. I'm based here in Dublin. Dublin's a good country for tech companies. So all of the really big tech giants, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, etc., all headquartered in Ireland. That's for tax reasons. That's another story altogether. But yeah, we do pretty well in terms of the size of country we are when it comes to tech startups. So yeah, we're pretty good for that. So company was called MX Sweep, worked there for 2 years. It got bought out by a bigger US email security company that was called FuseMail, Viper today. So got redundancy then, joined Email Laundry, another email security company, which I'm sure some of the listeners will remember. And that's where you and I would have first met on the road, George. Email Laundry was a really, really cool company. I got in, I was the 5th employee, and we were just small enough to innovate more rapidly than a lot of the bigger companies, and got a really good reputation. And maybe a victim of our own success, got acquired again. So kind of a deja vu moment. Oh, hey, Brian, we've been bought out. The redundancy was a little bit longer coming the second time, right? It came maybe 2.5 years later, when FireEye, who bought Email Laundry, decided they didn't want to own it anymore and basically shut it down. So that was kind of the genesis for Mesh. Was some of the techies from Email Laundry and myself had a bunch of ideas around email security and kind of what MSPs had been telling us for years. We're like, hey, it'd be cool if an email security product could do this. So we had a blank canvas in 2020, middle of the pandemic. So we were set up as a remote first company because we didn't have a choice. And yeah, we founded Mesh in Q3 of 2020. And yeah, so we're just over 3 years old now. This is our fourth year as a company, and I can get more into why we set it up and the nuts and bolts of it. But yeah, that's a high level overview of my experience in this space. Been working with MSPs now for over a decade, and love it. You know, I feel like I am my job kind of thing.
No, 100. I love the story, by the way. I just love how you got kind of into email lane, and then like that's been your specialty, but all good. And yeah, 100% agree with you that, Ireland, Dublin specifically has been this kind of, like incubator of all these, where all these companies park. Big, little, in between, just happens to be right time, right place, right tax rate. But I digress. Um, Also interesting that, like we always try and learn lessons, good and bad. And we've seen a lot of movement, right, over the last 3-4 years, especially in this little, MSP sandbox. And when a company acquires another company and it's like, nope, we're gonna shut it down. It's like, why did you buy it to begin with? But that's cool, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in our case, the company that bought us was so big that you know things that seemed like a good idea at one point in time, and if the broader strategy of the company shifts shortly after, there's enough money to go, we can just say goodbye to that revenue. And ultimately that's what they did. At the time I was pretty upset by it because I loved doing what I did, and I was the face of that company for a few years as the channel manager, and felt it was kind of, I wouldn't say I had built a house, that'd be wrong, but I played a big hand in it. So when they told me they were going to tear the house down, yeah, wasn't particularly happy about it, but it led to this. So I'm very, very grateful whoever decided to kill email laundry decided that, because it's led me to found Mesh. Lots of different pressures now as a founder, of course, and work a ridiculous amount of hours every week, but I'm happy with that.
100% feel the pain there, no question about it. Um, so so we'll talk about 2023 and 24 in a second, but like I feel like when we talk to people, like of course I'm based here out of the US, on the East Coast, which is, the most populated part of the country, let's be honest. And when I think about like my journey through the industry, there's just so many things happening, so many events, so many places to talk about. Just, you could be on the road all year long if you really wanted to, and just never really stop home.
Mhm.
I feel like the experience differs a little bit on your side, right? On the, Europe, UK, kind of like what that looks like. And then I even hear a similar kind of echo down in like Australia, New Zealand, like APAC region, right? Like, hey, there's stuff
Mhm.
happening. It just doesn't seem like it's happening as often and as big. And like everybody somehow makes it into the middle here at one point or another. So I'd love to hear like what your opinion is on why that happens.
I think ultimately it's opportunity, right? So I kind of see us as being like a 60s band, like the Beatles or the Stones, in terms of, yeah, it's great to make it in Ireland and the UK and be popular here, but if you want to crack it big time, you gotta go to the US. So yeah, that's what we're doing. Obviously the pandemic made travel tricky for everyone. We closed an investment round in the summer, so we've now got some boots on the ground in the US. And in Q4, I was back and forth across the Atlantic 3 times, so 3 events. Well, 2 events and one onboarding a new hire in the US. So yeah, like we're targeting English-speaking countries, right? So population of the UK is 60 million ish. Population of Ireland, I think, is now around 6. And the US is what, 330 million. Canada is another 30 or so. So, and then I think Australia is only 30, right? Massive country, but tiny population,
It's true.
similar to Canada in terms of just land versus people. So the US is where, if you're going after the English speaking market, it's where the biggest opportunity is. And, your industry calendar that you have is absolutely awesome, to try and plan out what your year's going to look like. All the big events are in the US, so you kind of you need to get over to them as much as you can. I'm actually thinking of relocating to the US potentially this year. So
Wow.
very early stages of investigating that. But yeah, that's kind of what
What
I'm scoping out.
what early days, but is there a particular part of the country or a state that you're looking into?
Uh, it'd have to be East Coast for the time difference. Um, I don't like the cold weather, so this time of year, especially in Ireland, but I'm sure it's. Are you in Philadelphia or are you just
Yeah,
massive Eagles fan?
it's 38 degrees right now. Fair enough.
Yeah, so for us it's early 40s in Fahrenheit right now, but it feels so much colder over here. Like I've been to Boston when it's been 20 below freezing, and it's over here, it's like, it could be 40 degrees. It feels colder here, being a little tiny island in the North Atlantic, the wind cuts through you. So I hate that, George, to be honest with you. So if I'm going to
So like
change.
mid-Atlantic South, right? Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe
Yeah,
Virginia, something like that.
yeah, I don't think it'd go as high as Virginia, but maybe from North Carolina down are all options, I would say, being considered. And then for the events, right? So I know, like, you travel as much as anyone I know in this space, right? Where did I see you? Would it have been Network Group Q4, and you had just flown in for like 2 nights, and then I think you were back and then back over a few days later for an Amsterdam event or something like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was in a 6 week back-to-back travel schedule. Jen,
yeah.
who's behind the scenes, has learned that the location of that network group event may have not been the best place on the planet for lodging.
Hmm.
And Uber doesn't exist there for some reason. So we went back
Yeah.
in time a little bit. But yeah, I remember at the back end of a 6 week run, it was like Philly, went to that network again, which was like 40 minutes south of Heathrow, then went
Hmm.
back, then went to Amsterdam, then went back, then went to Denver, then went back, and then and then it was IT Nation in Orlando. So I will admit, for all of our traveler pals out there, it seems like it's the rock star life. But for 6 weeks of travel, I probably had 8 weeks of me being not well. so,
Yeah.
so it does catch up with you.
Well, that was the point I was going to make. So the vast majority of the events are in the US. It's, I'd prefer to be uh, dipping over to Europe for just a couple of times a year, but predominantly doing the travel within the US versus it being the other way around. When you've got to cross the Atlantic for every event, it takes its toll on you. You're right. So as I said, I'm just gotten back from North America in the last few days. I've completely lost my suitcase. On
Oh
the way
no.
over, my laptop got water damage, so I had to get a new laptop shipped to me
Wow.
in the US. So, as
Did
I
you
said,
check your bag? How did the water damage?
oh yeah, so the water damage, no, that was my fault. My water bottle leaked in my backpack. Yeah, so I can't blame anyone for that. It was just bad luck or stupidity on my part. And then, yeah, bag completely lost on the way back. That was a checked bag with a
What
lot of
airline?
money. Air Canada. So yeah, so we're 3 days in now, no sign of it, not happy. But I digress. But the point I'm making there is, yeah, it appears to be the rock star lifestyle, but it's not a whole lot of fun. So if you can reduce the travel to an extent, yeah, that's part of the appeal of potentially relocating to the US as well.
100%. No, I mean, listen, if you do make it over here on a more permanent basis, can't wait to see you more often. It is definitely, well, at least the concept was your money used to go further when you did the math, but gotta balance all of that out before you do anything, right?
I think it still does. Like Dublin's one of the most expensive cities in the world at the minute. Like, rental costs anywhere just extortionate. You can't get, like, I think there's more value to be had in North America, in most cities in North America. Maybe not, Manhattan or something like that. You're not gonna get your bang for the buck there. But yeah, from the research I've done, it's like, oh, you can get a much nicer place in the southeast of the US than you can like somewhere not
For
so
sure.
nice in Dublin. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, Florida's a little bit explosive still, right? Where there's just more people coming and going. So things
Hmm.
are a little bit more, propped up in terms of cost there. But like North Carolina, South Carolina, there's a lot of good spots, I think, that and different parts of Florida, of course, you can still find some good deals. But I digress. Um, let's talk about when you set out to plan this time last year for 2023.
Mhm.
What did you guess right, and what did you guess wrong in terms of the, from an industry standpoint? I know
Yeah,
I'll give you a couple of things, right? Like,
sure, sure.
we were all talking this time last year that, like, sometime in the year, like, the stock market was going to crash, things are going to go down, and like bubble was going to burst, and then like everybody was going to have to like be in, in the bottom for a while. And then that kind of didn't happen. Like, it was bumpy, right? And it was a roller coaster a
Mhm,
little bit, but like
mhm.
it did mellow out, right? And we never saw that big dip. Or like, and I think the counter of that was a lot of tech companies laid off a lot of people last year, big tech companies, by like
Yeah.
double-digit percentages. So those are two things that I remember from this time last year, but go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the first one you kind of took it from me. That's exactly what I was gonna say. So we were in the process of raising money this time last year. So we'd kind of had knocks on the door for quite some time, but we wanted to get the company to a point where it was profitable before we entertained external investment. Simply because I didn't have the time to talk to investors while trying to grow it, but also you'd have a stronger hand when it came to negotiating. So we were lucky to get three offers from VCs, one in the US, two here at home in Ireland. And as we start working through the negotiations, then Silicon Valley Bank happened. That went bust, and then there's rumors of this potential domino effect. And I remember thinking, yeah, the economical outlook for globally, basically, because if the US tanks, everyone kind of tanks as a result. And I thought, oof, this looking pretty grim, but you're right, it mellowed out, and things feel relatively stable at the minute. Things can never be too stable these days. The other one then was I guess AI and automation. That's what I was thinking this time last year is what is that going to look like? I can't remember exactly when ChatGPT exploded, and then obviously the other ones came out behind it. But yeah, it was my kind of not a prediction, but where I thought the year was going was this is just going to dominate every podcast, social media post is going to be people telling you how to use these new tools, and we still see a lot of it. Um, from an MSP industry standpoint, to me it was interesting to see what would happen with events. So DattoCon in Miami, which was that September, early October.
It was like first week of October, second, third, fourth, something
Right.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first time I'd been to the US post pandemic. So my last event was IT Nation 2019. So yeah, I'd be doing probably 10, 15 events in the US pre-COVID. So I'd not been back since, and I had done DattoCon in Dublin. So it was nice that such a big European event was in my home city, and I didn't have to go on a plane to go to one of them. And obviously, both you and Jen were at that one. But I kind of felt it wasn't the best attended. And certainly at our booth, we didn't really get a whole lot of footfall. So my kind of thinking last year was, has the event industry changed somewhat since the pandemic? And was it a result of some of the events going online, some people just being reluctant to travel? So that was my concern at the start of the year was, hey, my strategy here with Mesh, one of my strategies to grow is to get in front of MSPs at events, right? Meet people on the booth, meet people in the bar. That's how I succeeded at email laundry a lot of the time. So I was fearful of that at the start of last year, but having attended a bunch of events the latter half of last year, IT Nation and DattoCon being the big two, my fears were allayed. And yeah, things were incredibly busy, incredibly well attended. So that was probably a prediction I'd gotten wrong. I thought maybe events aren't going to be as popular as they were pre-COVID. But look, you go to way more events than I do, Georgie. What's your take on that?
I do think, I think I'm going to be on a session tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, with a bunch of other people from the industry talking about this exact topic. So here's a preview, guys, for the IT/MSP channel. I do think 2023 was affected, and that there was a reverb still coming off of 22, 21. I do think that the recipe, you know, is slightly starting to change. Meaning, like, hey, the events that have been around forever and ever and ever, right? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Like, maybe it's, kind of gotten stale to some degree, right? You need to tweak your recipe a little bit, or I think there's been a new, kind of approach, which is, hey, we want to, we've seen this now, we know what this is, we understand why this is. Let's talk about something different for the sake of change, right? Kind of thing. So I think there was a little bit of an event explosion where all these new things were coming out in 23 that didn't exist before, which then like spreads the audience out a little bit, right? Where some of the events that you thought were going to be super attended were well attended, but not super attended. You got these other things that have popped up, right? There's more things happening simultaneously, to the point where there may be too many options to some degree. So I think that kind of happened in 23. I think that's going to kind of maybe shake itself out here in 24, where it's like, hey, like ideas are great. We love ideas. We love new concepts, but it's expensive for everybody to make it to these things. I hope that air travel and just moving around does not get more and more expensive, which definitely went up in 23. I mean, there's no question about it that the prices went up, flights, everything. So I do think that there is some reality, Brian, to, like, just like, you did a lot of SDR and you did a lot of sales calls, right? You get on the call and you say, hey, I'm going to tell you everything you could possibly know. But before I go down and tell you, like, I could be on the phone for hours. What do you want to get out of this call, right? Like, what do I need to cover with you today, right now, to make sure that you got your stuff in order? It's the same conversation with this topic, right? It's like, hey, when I go to an event as an attendee, as somebody who's trying to, what am I trying to get out of it, right? Am I trying to learn something? Am I trying to get the vibe of what's going on? What's the next bleeding edge? Like, what's working, what's not? Like, what is it that you're trying to get out of it? And I think the answer to that question determines where you go, right? If it's, hey, I can only be out of the, my business so many times per year. So the larger the event, the more people that are there, the more, peers that make it there, the more vendors are all in one place. I can check 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 things in one shot without me having to be out of the office for 3 months out of the year. Got it. Or it's, hey, I've been to this event for a decade. I think I might take a couple of years off, right? Because I think I got what I need out of it. What can I get net new, right? Am I trying to add a new line of business? Am I trying to learn, a new compliance, or is there some sort of complexity that I'm unsure about and I want to learn more about this specific topic? So that being said, I think that's going to drive things moving forward. And at the end of the day, I think there's a little. I'm going to say it out loud here. So sorry for those people out there that they're in the event business. Of the 100% of the IT service providers, managed service providers, pick whatever label you want to use. Less than 10% make it to an event in a 12-month calendar year. So like 90% don't. So think about how much money goes into that 10%.
Yeah, it's a lot. And you're probably the same as me. You see the same MSPs at multiple events, right? So I don't know if their business is so mature and well oiled that they can get out more, or they just enjoy the social side of the event. Probably a combination of both.
No, I mean, listen, I think the purpose of why people go back to events as your business matures changes. I've seen MSPs where in startup mode get into, hey, I'm in, kind of maturity mode. Then they go back to the event and now they're trying to figure out who's going to sell. And now they're there for a completely different reason. Or, hey, I'm an MSP, things are good. I spun a second company out of my MSP. Now I'm a vendor. I'm at the event on the other side. Or, hey, I want to put whether it's a formal or informal group together of people in the industry, and I may only see them a couple times a year in person. I use a bigger event as a reason to do that. And now I put that group together and now I figure out, hey, what's happening? I want to benchmark against other people so I make sure I'm in the right place. There's a lot of reasons, right?
Mhm.
But the reason does change over time depending on where you are. But there's one thing for sure: the concept is the people that are willing to invest a little bit of time and money out of their business to get to an event. They're categorized as people who are trying to get better, who are trying to grow, who are trying, to mature their businesses versus the people you never see.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the
Yeah.
people you never see are the majority of the people.
Yeah. Like the ones I see repeatedly are the ones that tend to be growing the most, and obviously there's a number of factors involved with that, but I think there's definitely a correlation there, right? It is that motivation to expose yourself to new ideas, as you said, what's the newest technology, what are the trends emerging in the space, can I meet with peers? Am I looking to meet with people who might buy my business? Am I looking to meet with MSPs who I might want to buy their business, etc.? But you're right, yeah. Lots of people I speak to have never been to an event, and I do try to encourage it, because I think it's a healthy thing to do, to expose yourself to new ideas. But yeah, as you said, it's expensive and it's not getting cheaper.
No, 100% not. Actually, I posted it on one of my social channels. I had a guy who posted a quick video. He was like, "Hey, I think the travel industry is about to explode." I was like, "Explode as an implode or explode?" He's like, "No, explode, meaning it's going to grow rapidly." And he's like, "But there's a negative reason why." He's like, "The negative reason why is if you're under 30 years old, you've given up on the concept of owning a house or buying a property. And so
Right.
if that dream is not real, you're going to spend all your time traveling. And so you're not going to save to buy something. You're just going to travel a lot." So I was like, how about that? I was like, does that hurt or does that help? The travel costs. Well, I still think a lot of the airlines, Brian, did not bring their full fleets back from COVID. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of planes are full, but they're not running as many planes as it was back in 2019. And so I think that there's been a little bit of artificial supply and demand, right? As a result, there's still less planes flying, but yet they're, that kind of thing. So we'll see how that works in 24. Let's talk about what you think's going to happen this year, right? So you're 2 days, not even 2 full days into the calendar. What from an MSP industry standpoint, what do you don't have to have a lot of them, maybe you only have one or two, but like what are your guesses for the year?
Yeah, I think more and more MSPs are going to get to grips with automation. I spend all day every day talking to MSPs, and the frequency with which that subject comes up is, it's night and day between where it was 12 months ago. So more and more MSPs are being exposed to obviously the different vendors in that space that are out there. I think more and more vendors are going to look to either buy that technology for their products or build it, right? So obviously you've got the likes of Pia and Roost and ConnectWise come out with their one at IT Nation, and Kaseya have CooperBot, etc. I think we'll see more of that, and more MSPs adopt those technologies and try and get them to play nice with all of their other vendors. That's the one that, as I said, comes up over and over again, and we're getting requests from MSPs. Can we, as a vendor, integrate with some of those tools? And I guess the appeal is replacing a certain type of techie with some AI and automation, right, and saving money. So that all makes sense. I think that's going to continue to grow. And then M&A is, I think, again projected to grow again this year after maybe a little bit of a slowdown in Q1 of last year. So I think we'll see naturally some consolidation with MSP focused vendors, and obviously the big guys will continue to buy up some smaller niche vendors that they just don't cover yet as a product. So yeah, I don't have any super hot takes on something that nobody else has probably considered for 2024. They're kind of the things that I see most of based off of what MSPs are kind of telling me that they're thinking, hey, here's where things are going. Could I make a crazy prediction for 2024? No. I think at some point we're going to see two very different sized MSPs, and that middle tier, I think, is maybe going to die away. I don't think that's going to happen this year, right? So I'm not saying it's a 2024 prediction, but I think at some point, you know, the amount of M&A that's going on in the MSP space, not necessarily just the vendor space, but the MSP space, and you've got, you know, I don't know, 20 super MSPs probably in the US. That's going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to buy up the successful smaller ones, and they're just going to mushroom into these gigantic MSPs. And then I think the middle guys will struggle to compete on, maybe not on service, but certainly on price and I guess just the ability to support differing needs of businesses. So you'll get people leaving and starting up small MSPs. So I think you'll have, you know, the 5-person shop and below, and then you'll have this gap up to really large MSPs. But I'm thinking that's a little bit further down the line. Obviously, with compliance and things like that, it's just going to be harder, I think, to start a new MSP and have to meet all the regulations that are, I'm sure, going to come in over the next few years and make it harder. Just that barrier to entry will be greater, I think, to start a new MSP at some point down the line. But we're not there yet. And that, I hope, doesn't sound like super negative or pessimistic on the industry, not at all. But I just, yeah, I see the bigger MSPs just all kind of merging into one, you know, several huge MSPs. And yeah, I just think the smaller guys are, you know, they've got their work cut out to compete against that, right? Because they're going to be hit from all angles. And we see that here in Ireland, we see it in the UK, so it's not unique to the US. I just think it's where the industry's headed. But I'd love to hear yours, Georgie. Now you speak to MSPs day in, day out.
I did not prepare for that. This call, I did not think about it. I can think off the top of my head. To your point, you know, the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer kind of thing, middle class disappearing from an MSP standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of vendors out there that help you outsource so that you don't have to be 100 people, right, in order to compete. I mean, price at the end of the day, it might be price, but I think the end result is the delivered customer experience. You know, for the price that you're charging, can you give them a good experience? You know, and if you can meet that, I still think that, you know, the IT services business, as much as we hear about, you know, global and big tech and work from anywhere, still very regional, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents. That being said, there can be, and maybe I'm just an extremes guy, right? But like, if you try and automate too much of the customer facing part, I believe you might get to a frustration point. Let me give you an example. Big 3 carriers of the cell phone companies here in the US, right? T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T. Yeah. And a year and a half ago, T-Mobile started firing customers who were calling into the call center for T-Mobile too many times in a month. And it's like, you're costing us too much, so we think that you're not a good customer. Take your business somewhere else. Could you think about that for a second? So at scale, instead of outsourcing their call center to another part of the world, they're like, no, we're going to keep our call center here in the US, but the people who are the offenders, we're going to take away the top 10% or whatever, right? Look at the inverse of that. All right, we could outsource to the Philippines, or, you know, I think, you know, Dell may have killed the India route a long time ago or whatever, right? But if you automate too much, and now you're literally like trying to get a hold of someone to solve a problem, and like the bot is just not cooperating, you get to a frustration point where you're like, well, if I can't talk to a human being, get me out of this. Like, I'm just not going to do this. So there is a little bit of a balancing act, I think, that goes to it. I'm all for efficiency. I love efficiency. I love to be able to do more with less. What I think pay less is, that's their trademark. Got to do more, pay less, or something like that. Whatever. Do more with less, right? I love that. I love that technology can help facilitate scale to a surface level, though, right? Like at some point, if you need to get something done and it ain't doing it, if you can't get a hold of someone, and like all of these customer service routes are just automation with nobody, who can actually talk to a human being, I think that could be, in the end, too far.
Oh,
Um,
I agree completely. Like I'm literally having this problem trying to figure out where my bag is with Air Canada. I cannot get to speak to a person. And yeah, there was another one recently where I was dealing with chatbot. I was trying to change flights, something else, different airline, and it's all a bot and can't help. So yeah, it does make you extremely frustrated, and you want to speak to a human.
so let me ask you this. In the US, there's an airline called Frontier Airlines. And one of the big things Frontier did about a year ago was they deleted their phone number. They disconnected their number. So you could only do through the app, you can only have to go through the bot. There is no 1-800 number or nothing. You can't talk to a human being. Which, by the way, I would say Frontier is the equivalent to your Ryanair, right? It's like, hey,
Good.
we're the
Yeah.
low budget, cheap, cheap, cheap. Like they even have a $4.99 per month unlimited flights, but there's all these restrictions, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so be careful with that one. So like Ryanair, I don't know if they deleted their phone number, but I remember an interview with the CEO of Ryanair, and he's like, "Hey, if we could set it up where people could stand on flights, we could get more people on the flight, and we could lower the price of the ticket." And I was like, "Just doesn't seem safe." But okay, I got what you're saying. Did they delete their phone number over there at Ryanair? I don't know. I don't know.
I avoid flying with them, Georgie, because yeah, you know, you can show up and not have read the very, very small print, and you know, they're looking to squeeze another €100 out of you. So yeah, the ticket itself could be €10, but all the add-ons and stuff, and you know, paying to go to the bathroom, you don't really have to do that. But yeah, they would. They'd love to charge you for that as well. Yeah, that guy is interesting. I don't think you have. Do you have bus lanes in the US? I guess you do, right? Where
So definitely in major cities there are bus lanes. Like New York City has bus lanes, for example. Or
yeah,
now they have like a bike lane and a bus lane, and now the cars used to have 2 lanes in a lot of areas, and now down to 1 lane.
yeah. I mean, that's happening everywhere. But so in Dublin, bus lane is bizarrely taxis can use it, right? So for buses and taxis. So the CEO of Ryanair passed whatever test it was and bought a license so that he could drive his car in the bus lane and skip traffic. I don't know if he's actually doing the driving or you know he's just being chauffeured or whatever. But yeah, interesting character. That whole model was actually based off of Southwest, so I don't think he really created it. He just saw what Southwest were doing. He's like, yeah, let's try and
I
replicate
think he
that.
took it a few notches further though.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like at the end of the day, $10 flight sounds fantastic. There's a bus company in the US, like if you book ahead of time enough, it's like a $1 bus between cities, and you're like, oh, that's cheap. But at some point, like you just said, like you get to the point where you just avoid it because you almost can't rely on it, right? Like you're waiting for the gotcha to come, and then all of a sudden your flight gets canceled, you're stranded, your stuff's missing, like you show up, to charge you like double the price. Like nobody, I feel like that's when you get too far down one angle, now you've broken the experience, and then like you lose people.
well, when they lost me a few years ago, I was on a flight like really early, 6 a.m. I'd probably been out late, and they continually advertise during the flight, right? So they'll sell absolutely everything, but they turn the PA system up as loud as they could. So most people were, you know, drifting in and out of sleep. It was still dark out, and they were blasting us with like, you know, trying to sell you scratch cards and things like that. So scratch cards, does that translate in the US? Lottery tickets kind of thing, but not
Lottery
actual
tickets,
lottery.
yeah.
But yeah, that's what they were selling. And I remember just going, never, ever again. I'm like, put myself through this, you know. They just didn't care about the customer experience. It was all about what they could get you to buy. Staff have to buy their own uniforms and pay for their own training. Yeah, it's just the company with ethics that just don't align with me. So even if they're cheaper, I will avoid at pretty much all costs. There's some places where you got to go to them. Actually, Network Group last year, which I know you attend quite frequently, or maybe it was the year before, they had an event in Newcastle, England, and I flew to Scotland to avoid going with Ryanair and got a train down. That's how much I sidestepped the
Wow.
US. Yeah. So that added probably, you know, 3 hours onto my trip. Didn't care. Avoid Ryanair at all costs.
Got it. Message received. So I think we could take some of the lessons of other industries and kind of apply it to the sandbox that we all live in, to the point where, like, I'm not saying don't do something, like if you keep on doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, definition of insanity. But if you go too far, if you go to an extreme level, I think that could be, also damaging, right? So you kind of have to get this, equilibrium of of things, right? Where you're kind of balancing everything. But I think that's kind of the fun part of the tech, being in the tech industry, right? Like there's a lot of new, always new.
Mhm.
It's almost like a toy store, right? Constantly opening up new. But there's also the business part of it, right? That you almost forget. And you're like, hey, love the tech, love the lights, love the automation. Need to make sure that, the back end makes sense too. And I will say this, Brian. I mean, I think we've been around the industry now. You said you've been in a decade. If I count my MSP time and my vendor time, I go back to about 2000, 2001. So maybe 2 decades or so. Um, Man, they sold a lot of hopes and dreams on in MSP vendor land, right? How many times have you heard single pane of glass? How many times have you heard, oh, this is gonna, do everything, short of making your coffee for you. You're gonna be able to hire less people, do more, da 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 da. And like you heard the word integration, like every other word. Um, I feel like the dream never really came true to some degree, right? Like you almost ended up having so many things to manage, that unified experience was more of marketing than it was reality. And I think, fast forward to what you said in this call, it's like, hey, I think automation's actually here. uh to what degree though? Like is it actually real?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I think it is. It will always have its limitations. I think the number of vendors MSPs deal with today is however many multiples of probably what it was 7 or 8 years ago. I used to think I knew most vendors in the room when I showed up at an event, and now, at IT Nation, half of them I've never heard of before, So, and look, there's so much money in this space because it's so hot, and the prediction is that it's going to continue to grow for the next however many years. So, obviously, private equity are putting a lot of money into vendors in the space, and for us, we're backed by VC company. Yeah, there's a lot of people who think this is an industry worth throwing money at, and with that comes the emergence of lots of new vendors trying to solve different little pieces of the problem. But with that, as you said, comes the likes of vendor fatigue, difficult to manage everything. And yeah, single pane of glass, I think, depending on the context, can never really exist. But if it's solving a single problem, then yeah, we kind of use that in some ways. Single pane of glass, you can manage all your customers from a single pane of glass when it comes to email security. You can't do that with other products, but I appreciate when you're talking single pane of glass, you mean manage all your customers for everything. Uh, I don't ever really see that existing. That's kind of a unicorn.
Yeah, I agree. I just, they used it so much so often. I would say maybe about 10 years ago, that you're like, wow, this is great. And like I was like, yeah, every year you're like, is this the year? Can I see it? I'm waiting for the magic update. And the magic update maybe never really came.
Yeah, I would say that's fair, and I don't think it will at this point. Obviously the big companies add lots and lots of different products to their stack, and if they can integrate them all, then maybe they could have a claim to do it. But I've not seen it yet, so I'm gonna remain skeptical.
No, agreed. Still skeptical. Well, let me you know, zooming out, right? Do you feel like, so the industry experts say that there's still a lot of like, hey, there's M&A up top, right? We talked about, and that's there. There's still more MSPs being started than there are MSPs being merged or acquired or closing for that matter.
Right.
So, I'm sure when you went out into the world and said, hey, we need to like justify why we're going out there to raise money for our company, our idea, you're like, hey, this is a big industry, it's growing. Like I heard, I don't know if it's true. I was talking to somebody, within the last 90 days, and they're like, oh, there's 90,000 IT companies in Germany. And I'm like, wow. I was like, can that be true? I don't know. That number sounds off. But so it's just funny that, when you start going into these different pockets of the world, they may call it something different, but when you just use the word IT company, now all of a sudden the number just, grows and grows and grows by leaps and bounds. How much of it's real? I don't know. Every time I talk to somebody, the number is different.
Yeah.
But do you still feel the industry is, net growing?
I do, but look, I have a very small sample size, right? So I'm basing it off of the experience that I see when I go to events, when I speak to MSPs, and when I hear from different people that I follow on LinkedIn, for example, that would probably have a lot more access to information than I do and what they share. And like you, it's a different number every time I see it. So when we were raising, I can't remember what the figure I gave was, but I was conservative with it, because the caveat to it all is, well, what defines an IT company, right? I could set up an MSP tomorrow and do IT support for, my uncle's law firm of two people and my friend's fruit and vegetable shop, and he's one person, and then I can call myself an MSP, So do I then get counted in that number? I mean, if it's 90,000 in Germany, then yes, absolutely, because I think that's on the high side. So is it net growing? I would think based off of the money that it attracts, it has to be. People with access to solid information on that are obviously encouraged by what they see. But yeah, I didn't even know that more MSPs are being created than are being acquired, merged, or going out of business. So I would say that's an encouraging sign.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think there's a lot of industry smart guys out there, like the Matt Lees of the world, right? Like, so easy to call yourself an IT company, right? You start a company, you could go to services that do that. You put up a website, you create a logo, and you're in business, right? Like, not everybody, not all things are created equal, but to that end, like if somebody started something, let's say you started Mesh like in the pandemic. What if you started an MSP in the last 3 years? You don't need necessarily have a physical location. Everybody's
Mhm.
remote. Everything's in the cloud. Everything's software as a service. You pay, a lot of it's pay as you go, some isn't. And like, back to your automation point, if we're at the high point from a watermark standpoint on being able to do a lot of things with not a lot of people, one would argue, you could, and I've seen this now. I know people they're on their third or fourth. Hey, they sold their MSP, they started a new one, they grew it a little bit, sold it again, started another, and like, it just almost gets easier every time.
I think it gets easier in some ways. As I said, you don't need a bricks and mortar building anymore to do this. Everything's in the cloud. I think to an extent you can support people remotely, but definitely for some things you need to be local and have boots on the ground for it. But as I said, I think regulation and the hoops you're going to have to jump through to support businesses is likely going to change. It's already on the way in different jurisdictions. I think that'll make it far trickier to just, I'm not saying on a whim, but to go, hey, for $500, I can get my logo, website, and corporation and get this going and tell people I'm an MSP. I think that's going to be trickier when, you're going to need to check a lot more boxes around compliance and insurance. So yeah, barrier to entry, I think, will be higher. Will it see the death of the middle class and MSP terms? I don't know. As I said, that was a bold prediction I was making, not for this year. Yeah, we'll see how it turns out. Come back to me in 2028, Georgie. We can have this chat again then and see
I'm
what
gonna
that looks like.
I'm gonna put that in my calendar. I'll see what happens.
Hopefully we're all still around by then as
I
well.
think hopefully we are for sure. On the 11th, kind of hour here on the session, a little bit, what do you want people to know about Mesh? Why should they take a look at it? And where do you see the most success when you're talking with MSPs from a partnership standpoint?
Yeah, good question. So, for MSPs listening who are extremely happy with their email security product today and their customers love it and they feel it can't get any better, then you can stop listening now if you want. There's zero to hear from my pitch. Why we built it, we wanted to solve two problems that we didn't feel at the time were being solved. Since then, a few vendors have come up with similar concepts. There's still a bunch of things that we do that are entirely unique. One of them was the ability to manage all your customers centrally, right? So if you want to see as an MSP, hey, has George Bardassi sent an email to any one of my clients? I want to search that across them all, rather than with other products, you got to log into the individual tenant, search, et cetera, et cetera. So from a threat hunting point of view, it really lends itself to having true multi-tenancy there across tenancy, right? So that was one of the things we can do. The mantra was basically, if I want to do something for one customer, it should just be as easy to do it for all my customers, right? It could be block a sender, allow an IP address, update a policy, whatever it might be, cascade down from MSP level to client level. And we didn't feel anyone was doing that. The second one was we felt, without going too technical, but just how email security is implemented, right? So historically, most email security products have been email security gateways, so perimeter-based protection, stopping the email before it gets near the mail environment. The last, 7, 8, 9 years now, since the move of email to the cloud, there's been the emergence of API-based vendors, so integrating into the mailbox and scanning the email when it hits the mailbox and then kicking it out if it's bad. And I kind of see it as, kind of like a security guard on the door of a club or a bar. Your email security gateway is standing on the outside saying, hey, not tonight, you're wearing the wrong shoes, or go right on in. And it has a couple of shortcomings in terms of, if it lets you in, it can't reach in and pull you back out, right? It can't go into the mailbox and rip stuff back out. It's very much of the opinion, it was fine when I checked it. And then it doesn't see what's already going on the inside, right? So it doesn't see your internally sent traffic. So there are all the things that the API-based vendors say, hey, we do. I see the API-based vendors as kind of like the security guard on the dance floor. It's on the inside seeing what's going on. It can kick stuff out if trouble has started internally. It does see internally sent emails, but its shortcoming is, if it doesn't have something on the gateway, then it's kind of got an open door policy, right? Everyone's allowed in, then they're analyzed and can be thrown out. So we were seeing MSPs double up, so getting one email security provider as their gateway, and then layering that with another email security provider as their API product. And with that came double protection, which is absolutely a positive, but the negatives were onboard twice, manage twice, search in 2 separate places for emails, 2 separate companies to support you, and 2 invoices at the end of the month that, you're trying to solve the same problem, you're paying double for it. And then if you go back to the first challenge we wanted to solve, was this kind of global view and control. Neither product has that, right? So you're managing your clients individually. So that's what Mesh was set up to solve, is that, hey, if you want an email security gateway, if you want to replace your existing gateway, you think it's not good enough, you can have Mesh Gateway. If you've got an API product that you're looking to replace, you can have Mesh 365. Or if you see the value in doubling up with a security guard on both the door and the dance floor, but they actually talk to each other and like each other and are not double the cost, well, then you've got Mesh Unified, and you can mix and match that on a per client basis, and you can manage them all centrally from, dare I say it, George, a single pane of glass, where you can make changes to a single customer or to all your customers just as easily. So that's a very, very long-winded elevator pitch. It's got to be a tall building for me to get that out in the elevator. But we're pretty, I think MSPs are now at the point where they can smell, cheesy sales lines and companies that over promise, right? So as I said, if you're happy with your existing provider today, you don't need to think of changing. MSPs have a million things to be dealing with and fires to put out. Changing vendors or shopping around for vendors when they don't have a problem is never something we want to entertain. We help MSPs where they recognize, hey, my existing product could be better at detection, its end user experience could be improved, but for the most part, what we see is MSPs are looking for something that is easier to manage. It's going to increase their operational efficiency, and that obviously lends itself to being more profitable and hopefully growing revenues as well. So that's where we've had success. So we're at about 200 MSPs now, half of which are in the US, most of which we achieved without having anyone over there, which was nice, but we want to grow that. And they move for a variety of reasons, but kind of the one that underpins it all is something that's just easier to manage and a company that's easy to deal with. So we have MSPs saying really positive things about us on the various communities out there, Tech Tribe, MSP subreddit. So if you go ahead and search what people say about Mesh, mostly, if not all, positive.
Be careful on that Reddit.
Oh yeah, Wild Wild West for sure. A double-edged sword.
Totally Wild West. My favorite new show of the year so far is Slow Horses on Apple TV Plus.
Okay,
So
not heard of it.
check it out. It's a UK based show. I loved it. I like binge watched all 3 seasons like basically in a day because I was really into it. So you should check that out because it's kind of in your neck of the woods. Brian, where do people find more about Mesh and how do they contact you?
Yeah, so you can fill in a contact form on our website, which is meshsecurity.io. Or you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, Brian Byrne, and I'm quite well connected in this space on LinkedIn, so it shouldn't be too hard to find me. I'd hope I'm near the top of the search results, although it's a very common name, especially here in Ireland.
Fair enough. Guys, this session was 1000% recorded. We went a little bit all over the place, but I love these beginning of the year and end of year ones, right? Because you can kind of talk about things in a holistic way. And sometimes we forget to do that because we're so entrenched in the lanes that we're in. So you will find this session eventually on mspinitiative.com under sessions. We'll post it to YouTube. We'll post it to the podcatchers, but it'll also be there. Obviously, check out meshsecurity.io or hit Brian in online. If you can't find him, send me a message. I'll get you in the right place. But I'm excited for 2024. I just really love technology. I just think that, there's a cool, every year there's like a new trend of things that are coming down the pipe. And like some people sit and wait, some people jump on the wave. I'm an early adopter guy, but that's not necessarily production ready stuff. But I love to tinker. And I'm sure a lot of the people who listen to this are tinkerers as well. Brian, thank you for jumping on. I appreciate it. Hopefully you get the year started off, all guns blazing. I know things kind of slow their way into rolling, but and if you do make it over here to permanently on the East Coast, let us know where you land so we can plan for you, my friend.
We'll do. Well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks in the UK anyway, Georgie, and then I'll be at Right of Boom, which is the first one we've confirmed in the US this year. And thanks for having me on, and also thanks for everything that you do in this space. I don't know how you wear the hats that you do, being a vendor, but also being this community guy. So I think everyone, vendors and MSPs alike, get tons of value from what you do for the community, George. So
I appreciate that.
yeah, thank you very much.
Here's a quick answer. This versus that. I think that's the difference. Couldn't help it, man. You gray hair. Love it. Absolutely.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you very much. I calmed it today because I knew this was being recorded. Had this not been recorded, Georgie, I wouldn't have bothered.
I got you. Talk soon, my friend.
All right. Take it easy. See you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.